Good evening, Tulane parents. My name is Penny Wyatt. I'm the Director of Family Programs. We're so glad that you've joined us for tonight's webinar, Connecting Students to Employers, Meet Tulane's Employer Connections team. I am particularly excited about tonight's webinar because it is a new topic in our series. We have worked with colleagues across campus who work in that career development sphere at Tulane to put some new material together for parents this year. And so this is one in a series of different things that we're doing to demonstrate to parents sort of the A to Z wraparound attention to career development that our colleagues across the campus are providing for your students. So I hope that you will appreciate this information and get back to us, engage with us with questions, and enjoy what you'll learn. So I am really grateful to tonight's panelists who are Kirsten Heintz who's the Director for Employer Connections within the Newcomb-Tulane College Career Service Department, and Chloe Lantz, who's the Director of Employer Engagement within the Freeman School of Business Career Management Center. So without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Kirsten.
Thanks so much, Penny. We appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. And as Penny said, I'm the Director of Employer Connections for NTC or Newcomb-Tulane College. We service all of the undergraduates across campus. And this is a new role for Tulane. I just started in October, and I couldn't be more grateful for the partnership and collaboration with Chloe Lantz and her team. They have taught me a lot in a short time, and we have been building a lot of new opportunities together and just having a great time. So, Chloe, I'll kick it to you.
Thanks, Kirsten, and thanks everyone for joining us this evening. As Penny mentioned, I'm Chloe Lantz. I'm the Director of Employer Engagement for the Freeman School of Business. Delighted to be with you all this evening. I have been with the business school. This is now my third year, and excited to have seen both Kirsten and I's teams grow in the last few years. So we're looking forward to sharing more with you this evening and appreciate you joining.
Next slide, Penny. So while we are a decentralized career center where we have career centers for business school, for NTC for all undergraduate, School of Public Health, and architecture, we all come together under the same website, the career.tulane.edu. Next slide, please. This is a snapshot of our homepage, and you'll see that all of our career services teams are listed there. It's great because it's kind of a one-stop shop. So whether your student is a business student or a liberal arts student, or maybe they changed their major, you can go to the same spot for all of the information having to do with career services and different opportunities and events that we have going on. I think that our colleagues had previously presented, but just to let you know, we each have career coaches, and we also have career educators in our departments. And then our teams are really charged with connecting with employers, getting employers to come to campus to talk to our students about different career paths, offer them opportunities for internships and jobs post-graduation. Another way that we like to collaborate with all of our teams is in our mini career fairs. We are now doing 3 mini career fairs each semester. We hold them in the LBC. We had one in January. We have one coming up next week. Feel free to encourage your students to check it out. It's Wednesday the 19th. And we have another one in March 19th. We have all different types of employers from different backgrounds at these, but there's only 10. So it's not as intimidating as some of those really large career fairs. And it gives students an opportunity to check out businesses that maybe they wouldn't have thought of or had never heard of. So it really lends itself to that exploration. And then the ones that they really want to meet, they can have a little bit more one-on-one time. Next slide.
I'm going to share a little bit with you all about how you and I'm so used to saying students because we try really hard not to call them kids at work. So I'm just going to keep calling your kids students, but you know who I mean. Talking about how you and your students can stay in the know. Next slide. The other thing I was just going to add, Kirsten, thanks for talking about our structure and decentralization. For a bit of reference, if anybody's wondering other schools, how they compare if they are centralized career centers versus decentralized. In general, it's about half and half. I would say from the student's perspective, they actually benefit a little bit more from a decentralized career center setup because the way that our teams work, we're able to offer a more tailored service to them. So Kirsten's team gets an email, they're looking for accounting students, and they're able to flip that straight over to my team, and we can work directly with that employer and get them connected more directly. I think that if anything for a university that might benefit on the staff and faculty side to be centralized. But the good news is for you and your students that we are indeed decentralized. Now, as I mentioned, I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can stay in the know. So our teams are regularly communicating with your students regarding jobs, internships, and events. Those are the key things that employers want to engage us with. We'll talk a little bit more about the specific types of events and the information that they can attain from those. But in general, those are really the key three areas: jobs, internships, and events. And there's a few different ways for students and yourselves to stay in the know. Your students would be getting emails directly from our teams. They're also getting messages which they can indeed turn on email notifications for via certain tools. I'm sharing a screenshot right now of one of those tools, Handshake. And then we also utilize our coaching staff who meet and mentor students and coach them on their career journey. We also utilize that staff members as well as another channel to help get the word out. As I mentioned, the screenshot you're looking at here is Handshake. So you can think of this as basically a student's Indeed or LinkedIn job search tool. Right now, we are on the jobs homepage, and you can see a quick screenshot of if a student were to come in and click, these are some of the jobs. I will say I took the screenshot last week, so it might look a little bit different today because it's constantly being updated. But last week when we looked at this, you can see we've got a leadership program with Marriott International. We've got a project manager with Epic Healthcare, an accounting associate role for KPMG. So a nice mix of opportunities. I will say from the student's perspective, the more they complete their profiles and fill out information about themselves and their interests, their major, their companies of interest, the more tailored this information is going to get for them. So it is a pretty robust tool. It does a really good job of what I'll call with that passive job search, assuming that the student is filling out their profile, something we regularly coach them on. I will also just point out a few things. Marriott and KPMG, both companies that are going to be on campus within the next month. So we're excited to, have opportunities for students to engage and see jobs available, but also we're trying to make sure that the folks that are looking to hire that are local or willing to come to campus are coming to campus. You will also see both of those organizations I mentioned have a little tiny tag under them that says Tulane Connection. So we actually, or forgive me, collection. We have collections in which we're able to organize employers. So your student can actually go and look at these different collections and see, I think some of the examples are great for alumni, or we'll also have one for each school. So we have one that says great for Freeman School of Business students. There's even some that say close to campus. There's different collections for different ideas. So they actually, if you're not really sure who to look for, it's a really easy place to start is those Tulane collections, because for the most part, those are organizations that we already have connections with. Next slide. Now, Handshake, the tool that I just showed you a screenshot of, I believe that is something, I think we could share preview links with a parent, but unless you have a profile, which I believe you need to be a student to have a profile, you wouldn't have access. However, the first website that Kirsten mentioned, the career.tulane.edu, it's a public website, and everything from Handshake, the job feed, as well as right now what we're looking at as an event feed, is the screenshot on the slide. That is public, and you would be able to see that. So if you wanted to go to career.tulane.edu and pull this up, this is under the events page. And I will say this is where, from the student's perspective, it does not matter that our career centers are decentralized, because from the way they see it, they're seeing events across the university. Now, granted, they can filter and they can see specific events based on which school that they're in or which ones they're interested in. But you can see here we've got a nice mix of events. The first was an alumni mentoring program with the School of Tropical Health and Medicine. We had one of our key partners on campus, Bernhard, was tabling as that next event. There was a more of a professional development driven session on how to network like a pro. We also had an info session from a financial organization. So a quick overview, the types of events that we are hosting. We like to have a mix. I will say, and Kirsten, you can share if it's a little bit different from your end, but I think probably the vast majority of the events that we're hosting on campus are likely an employer info session. So that's an employer who would like to recruit Tulane students. We want to get them in front of some Tulane talent. They're going to come, they're going to talk about themselves, talk about the internship or job that they're currently recruiting for and or will be recruiting for soon, and engage with students. So most of the time after an info session, students have an opportunity to go line up and chat with these folks. You can chat directly with the KPMG recruiter, the Marriott recruiter. And a lot of times, I would say for our business school events, I, I I think it's more, but I'm going to conservatively say that 75% of our events have alumni that want to come back. So a lot of times those alumni are the ones who help us get connected with those recruiting contacts and get them on campus. So a really great way for your students to see themselves in the shoes of someone else who's been in their major in the school and has now made it into that profession. So that's one type of event is an employer info session. Employers will also host interviews, though. They'll do that either on campus or a lot of times we'll just help facilitate a virtual interview session for employers. As Kirsten mentioned, we're holding many career fairs. We also have some more unique events. So we might have a networking event if we've got a ton of alumni and maybe they're not necessarily in recruitment positions, but they've got really interesting roles or they're in an industry that our students are in, want to learn more about. And we just give students an opportunity. I'll call it a safe space. I think we hear a lot from students that sometimes it could be overwhelming to ask what they're going to consider a stupid session or a question in an info session. But networking, we might have smaller groups in which they can engage with alumni or other industry professionals and really just learn more. That might not be as much about recruitment as it might be about learning. And the same goes for professional development series. So in a few weeks, we're going to have Blue Cross Blue Shield on campus, and they're hosting a salary negotiations workshop. So obviously, Blue Cross Blue Shield also has opportunities, jobs, and internships that they want students to be aware of and apply for. But we actually have been making a push recently to say, that's great. We'd love you to come to an info session, but I will say an even better way to get some bodies in the room is to provide some information, to provide some value to students beyond just talking about yourselves and your culture and your roles. So in this case, we might get some students in the room who just want to learn about salary negotiations, but in the process might actually think, oh, okay, I learned a little bit more about Blue Cross Blue Shield, and now maybe I should start considering them as an employer. So it's another way that we're trying to develop that relationship for our students and our employers. Next
Yeah,
slide.
and I'm sorry.
No, please add on.
No, I was going to say that I think that you're absolutely right. Having that actual experience, I think those are the most engaging ones for some of the students. And when they do those and then they follow it up with the interview process, it's a win-win.
And I meant to add as well, we have hundreds of events in a given year, at least over 100 in the fall semester. Fall tends to be the busier recruitment season, but it can vary. So if you're wondering, over 100 events in a semester in which students can engage and meet with employers on campus.
Before we move on to the next slide, I just thought I would ask you all to point out here, this is a screenshot of the website, but I wanted parents to note that you even have a dedicated spot on this website for some information for parents and families. So you see that tab up there at the top along that green navigation bar. And so there's some, content that's there just to even give parents some guidance or encouragement about how their student engages in all of this. So.
Thank you, Penny. Yeah, we welcome you to go and check out the site. The other thing I don't think that I had mentioned as far as staying in the know, of course, we want them to know about events and jobs, but that's a good point, Penny. There's other resources on here. There's blog posts. We have our coaching team write blog posts, how to prepare for an informational interview. What is an informational interview? How to prepare to meet an employer. We have posts about some of the top internship, there's rankings that organizations put out about the top companies to go intern for. We're regularly trying to push out content like that to help inspire students and kind of keep them in the flow of thinking about their careers.
So we thought you might be interested in learning about some of the top employers for Tulane. Penny, if you can go to the next slide. Each year, at in May, we do what they call a first destination survey. So all the graduating seniors, we put this survey out. We ask them to fill it out, letting us know where they're going next. Are they going to graduate school? Have they received a job offer? Are they going into the military or perhaps volunteering? And these are the top 10 from last year. You'll see that there is a mix of industries. We've got finance and accounting, healthcare, consulting, and the creative arts agencies. And many of these employers have come to campus. But as Chloe and I will admit, it is challenging sometimes for us to get to all of the employers that our students want to be involved with. And that's because we have such a diverse student body population. Many students are coming from 500 miles or more, or even internationally. And so one of the ways that we have found that we can get into some of these employers that maybe we don't have immediate connections to are our alumni network and parents. Um, that's a great way for us to get into some industries that they're not in our backyard. And so we don't have that advantage that some of the state schools do. But the alumni are just incredible. They want to give back. They want to stay involved. I was on the phone with one today, and she said, "I will use any opportunity to come back to Tulane. I just love it so much, and I appreciate all the people that helped me along the way, and I want to be able to give back." So, we are lucky that we have such a large alumni population that wants to give back and are in these positions. I think we've got alumni in every one of these industries here in the top 10 that we have here. And next slide, please.
So you might also be interested to hear what we hear from employers. So Kirsten and I in our roles are often in that backroom conversation. We are constantly asking for feedback. And as Kirsten mentioned, a lot of these folks are alumni or they're folks like yourselves, where if you were to make a connection for us and bring yourself and a recruiter to campus, you've got a vested interest in how our students show up. So we're regularly getting feedback from employers, whether anecdotal or more data driven, and asking how are our students showing up and what is it really that they are looking for. The number one answer that we hear constantly is soft skills. I even heard an employer once refer to it as survival skills because it's really kind of the baseline for how you're going to show up in the professional world. It is, of course, important. There are obviously majors in which, there's the engineering, the technical side, the accounting and finance side, where if you don't have a baseline layer of those technical skills, you're not going to be considered. However, I will say that still we hear from employers those soft skills are the most important because they are the hardest to teach. They know, and from the technical side, that yes, we want you to have a working knowledge, but most likely we're going to have to teach you our technical way of going about whatever that business line is. But it's those soft skills that really make a difference, and they see that in the longevity of some of their best employers or employees, excuse me. The second thing we hear, you might imagine, I'm sure you experience it yourselves, is that first impressions matter. So we really want to impart with students that perfecting their personal pitch and being able to quickly and succinctly, but very clearly and confidently communicate their personal pitch can be an absolute game changer. That also kind of goes into the third bullet that we have here, networking. When you're meeting someone, helping them to understand who you are, what you're interested in. I think we all know that if they don't know that, then they can't really, it's hard for them to make any connections for you. We also know it's a really competitive world. So from employers, I won't say this is the case for everybody. And it's not to say that the only way for a student to get a job is to network. But because it is superlatively competitive, a lot of times for those larger employers, who you know or who you've talked with can make a difference. It can be how your resume gets pulled off that pile. So networking can be really key, even if it's not necessarily that you knew someone personally, but just sending a LinkedIn message to someone at an organization and saying, "I'd love to learn more about your role. I'm super interested in working at Marriott. Would you have 15 minutes to chat with me?" We also try and remind our students that even if there are networking opportunities where maybe this isn't a person that is in a role that I see myself in, or even in an industry that I'm all that interested in, taking the opportunity, first of all, just to practice and just to practice that personal pitch, but also thinking about it. I don't want to make this sound horribly transactional, but thinking about it in the way that you might not know who that person knows. They might be in a certain industry, but they might have strong connections elsewhere. And, if they enjoy chatting with you and they feel like you're someone that they'd like to help, you never know who actually might play a part in your career. I think we all probably can personally attest to some form of that in our own careers. And then the
Yeah,
last
Chloe.
line you might not,
Oh, sorry.
oh, go ahead.
Good.
Please.
Oh, no, I was just going to add to that. We just recently had a student panel, and one of the students that attended one of our courses, career launch, he was saying that he didn't want to go to this one networking dinner because there was nobody in finance at that dinner. And the coach encouraged him to go anyway. And he ended up sitting next to an alumni who did not work in finance, but her husband did. And he was very well connected. And that ended up leading to his internship at Goldman Sachs this year.
And Kirsten, I think you have another really good story to help drive home the need for the personal pitch, huh?
Yeah, I do. And it happened just last week. We had some alumni in, and one of them was sharing a story about how important the personal pitch is. And she said when she was interviewing for her internship, she told them, I'm really interested in this investing role. As a matter of fact, my first investment was when I was 11 years old in an elephant. And she went on to talk about this company that had was rescuing elephants. And I'll tell you that she stood out from everybody else, and that's what we need to look for, those really interesting tidbits and teaching the students how to sell themselves and make them stand out from everybody else, because there are so many talented students and so many great applicants. We want to make sure that our Tulane students are standing out above everyone else.
That's great. The last bullet that I'll add on this page is just curiosity. Helping your students stay in the moment. I have heard some feedback sometimes, like the Apple Watch, the digital world that we live in, it makes it really hard to stay present. So they might be in an interview and see that ping on their watch and look down, but staying curious and staying present. I will also share that a number of employers have commented on the fact that they never forget the first student in an info session to raise their hand and ask a question. So that's another great way for them to stand out. And that's also really what those employers are looking for. Next slide.
Actually, Penny, we were on the wrong one. If you could back up one.
Oh,
Sorry. So the importance of internships. Sorry.
yeah, there we go. So I know you're probably thinking more about jobs than internships and wondering why we're going to talk about the importance of internships. Obviously, I think we all understand the importance of jobs. That may or may not be one of the main reasons that your students are in school. I imagine for a lot of you, you're hoping that's the case while they're in school in the next step. But I would say that one of those steps that they cannot skip or really should consider not skipping is finding some internship experience. So whether or not that is just some general work experience, sometimes it's even volunteer experience over the summer, it really can make a big difference and is a resume booster. I will say specifically for those larger or highly competitive roles. Kirsten, I know this might be it might be maybe more the engineering world. For us in the business school, it's definitely those really highly competitive finance and accounting firms. But the timeline, I don't want to scare you all, but we do try and make sure our students understand this. The timeline is so aggressive. We are not fans of it, but basically, sophomore year of highly competitive organizations, they are recruiting students for their summer after their junior year. You did hear me correctly. That's about a year and a half, maybe a little bit over a year and a half and change, in which employers are recruiting students for that post junior year. We call it their rising senior year summer internship. Unfortunately, the reason they are doing that is because they're trying to stay ahead of their competitors. And so slowly over the years, the timeline has slipped and slipped more. They've started to find out, oh, if I beat that next organization to campus, then I can get in front of students sooner. We are very much hoping that this is where that timeline stops. Otherwise, Kirsten and I feel like they're just going to start recruiting at high schools, and we're not really going to know how to help your students prepare. But for right now, the way we can help them prepare is by helping them know. Now, by all means, this is not for everybody. It's not every industry, but for some of those highly competitive industries, if you're any top tech firm that you're thinking about, they are very likely hiring well in advance. And the ROI for interns, as you might imagine, is fantastic from the employer's perspective. I don't mean to sound crass, but you get to try before you buy. And who wouldn't appreciate that opportunity? If you think about it, when they hire for that junior summer, in a year from that, then that student will be graduating. And very often, especially those larger competitive organizations, are using internship pipelines to convert full-time offers. So that makes it even harder for students who didn't intern with that organization to be considered for a full-time role. Because there are some organizations where if they can fully fill their full-time roles the next year with interns, they'll do it. It's not every day, it's not all the time that they're able to do that. Very well, they'll make offers, not all of them get accepted, and then they'll open up full-time offers to graduating students. But it's probably a slightly different process than when you and I were in school and something new to be thinking about. But just so you know, we do really try and coach our students to be prepared for that timeline if indeed they are going for some of those more competitive engineering, finance, accounting. Kirsten, any other industries that you think of that are also really aggressive in their timelines like that?
Yeah, I would say the engineering is definitely in that. And I find that the more employers I talk to, their timelines are moving up. And I think it's for the same reasons. They want the cream of the crop. And so, I was talking to a nonprofit last week who said that they had opened up some positions and they were planning on having it open for several months. They closed it like 4 months early because they got such great candidates in the beginning. So I'm seeing a trend that it's going more that way. And then also to share the ROI on interns, there was some recent NACE data that I got to look at today. The National Association of Colleges and Employers, they do national surveys, and about 56% of the students that get internships are offered full-time roles afterwards. And that's compared to I think it's 22% for ones that don't have internships. So it may not even be that it was at their company, but just having the internship is going to make them a more sought after candidate.
Yeah, that's a great ad. We've heard from consulting firms, hey, we don't expect that everyone's going to have consulting experience or a consulting internship, but it's really great to hear how you can tell me the role that you took on at that other organization, how you consulted, how you applied consultative problem solving and thinking in your role. And as long as you can tell that story, it doesn't have to be the perfect organization or in the perfect industry, but experience really does make a difference. As far as finding the right fit, it's gonna depend on the student, but we highly recommend and we push our employers very hard. There's a lot of data and reasons why any internship that a student is seeking should be paid. I think that also might be a different trend than when you and I were in school. Very often internships were probably unpaid. There's a lot of inequity. You imagine a student who can go the summer without being paid versus one who can't, then you're not able to really access the talent that could be accessible. So one thing for the employer side that we try and drive home, but from the student side, just so you know, they can and very well should expect to be paid. Now, there are certain industries that are behind on this. I believe the arts, a lot of marketing organizations tend to be a little bit behind. So sometimes they will, if you have to take an unpaid role, and you can, by all means, get the experience. But just so you know, it's more of a trend for students to expect to make some pretty good money while they're interning for the summer. We also want students to look for structured programs. It shouldn't be that they're just in an office making copies and getting coffee. The best internships, and I will tell you, there's some really impressive award-winning internships where students leave and they have some really incredible professional experience under their belts. There is an onboarding. There is a whole class of interns where they're getting to network with one another, skill build together. There's mentorship baked in. They've got you a mentor either in one division, or you might even rotate mentors throughout the summer. So just so you know, there's some really great programs out there that can provide some incredible experience. So we try and direct students to some more structured internship programs, knowing that they can expect to get professional experience during the summer. And then a few success stories I'm sure you'd like to hear. I will share one that highlights that you still can get a full-time role if you do not have that internship experience. We had a student who applied for, it was an energy trading internship. And she got passed for it because she was very honest with the recruiter when he asked her a question. If you might imagine, if you're in the sales and trading world, they expect you to have a pretty generous risk tolerance. She answered an interview question in which she portrayed herself as much less risk tolerant. She actually described herself as pretty risk averse. And, when the recruiter said, "Hey, I got to be honest, that's not normally the type of profile that we're looking for in this role. You really know your stuff, but I'm wondering if it's a good fit." And she said, I don't enjoy taking on risk. I love the energy world. I love everything I've learned, but it really, perhaps you're right. That's not the best fit." So she missed that internship, but she stayed connected with that recruiter that she'd met on campus. And the next summer, she reached out and asked what roles he might have. And he had a full-time role that was available because he'd met her, he knew enough about her, and knew that she did know her stuff. She was able to get a full-time role. So hopefully that
Yeah.
helps assuage a little bit of the fears that you can't get a role without an internship. And Kirsten, I think you've got a good one too.
Yeah. So I've got more about career exploration and exploring different internship options. In October, we had a Wall Street Comes to Tulane event, and we had a separate segment just for the non-business students that may be interested but didn't, they hadn't committed to business yet. And one of the students that attended went up to the gentleman that was a lead presenter, and he said, "I can't thank you enough for coming and sharing, all of your knowledge about the world of finance and what it's really like to do these jobs. And now know I absolutely don't want to go into finance." And he thought that was such a great win because now this student is not going to go down that career path, and he knows to try some other things out, and it won't be a waste of time. You won't pursue advanced degrees that aren't going to bring him joy. So he would thought that was a real win.
It's powerful knowledge to have.
Next slide, please, Penny. So how can you get involved? And if you could go to the next one. Um, this is our request for your call to action. The first is to encourage your kids to get engaged. Please, if they can attend the events, even if they can't come for the whole events. I know in business school, there's some that are a little bit more structured, but the career corners are easy ones. They can pop in and out as they have time, and staying in the know. Make sure that they're filling out their handshake profiles and that they're turning their alerts on so that they can see everything that's coming to campus. And feel free to check the website. You can encourage them and see if they're, if they're in the know about the events that are on there, because you'll be able to see them too. Oh, I'm sorry, Chloe, stealing your
No, all
thunder.
good. By all means. The other thing that we would ask is if you can, I'm sure no college student is going to welcome this from their parent, but encourage them and help them practice networking. If they're home for the holidays and you're out to dinner and you run into a family friend, having them consider practicing their personal pitch. I think, again, we all probably have had some experience in our career past where someone that we knew was able to help us in a meaningful way because they knew what we were interested in and what we were pursuing in our degrees or what we were trying to do with our careers. So a lot of times that is friends and family. So having them practice that personal pitch, even if it's to no avail for an actual career movement, I think we know to the next bullet point, confidence sells. And the more that they practice that and the more they say, "I'm XYZ, I'm studying this, and this is what I'm really interested in, and I'm hoping to find a role in this, that, and the other," being able to confidently express that and clearly communicate is huge. And I know I already talked about curiosity, but encouraging them to, I had a student recently we were in an event and I heard them mentioning how they're like, wow, that was really technical. The employer was talking about really specific industry stuff, and I just didn't, it just went right over my head. The one thing you can always do in a situation like that is ask a question. Especially if it's going over your head, then you actually have an opportunity to learn something. I'm sure if you have anything, it's probably just a million questions. So encouraging them to stay curious, and helping them be that student that is the first one to raise their hand at info session and ask question, because they will stand out and we will all love them for it.
And our last ask is help us build our network. If you work for a company that has internship or entry-level positions for when students get out, please let us know. We would love to connect with you, with your recruiter, if that's not you. And there may be somebody in your network that would offer that same opportunity. So we welcome those calls. And you'll see on the next slide um, our contact information. Feel free to email either one of us. If you're not sure which one, we'll make sure it gets to the right person. Um, we work very collaboratively, and we appreciate Penny so much for you having us on tonight.
Yeah, thank you all. Hopefully this was helpful information. Um, Feel free to take a screenshot of our emails, as Kirsten said, email either both of us. And Penny, I believe we are open for questions.
Yes, we are. So I'll go back to that slide with their email addresses before we finish. But I wanted to invite our participants to submit a question now for Chloe and Kirsten to respond to. And so I'll allow a little bit of time here. I know that there was a question I wanted to ask on behalf of parents. You all mentioned soft skills several times. But could you, and this might be really apparent to our parent participants tonight, but could you just like briefly make a list of soft skills for us off the top of
Sure.
your head? What do you think of? What are the ones that you especially hear about?
Absolutely. Since I'm the one who was driving that home the most, I'm happy to share. I think the number one is communication. So whether that's verbal or written, um, we have heard from employers, and it's not a Tulane common, it's in general, that students kind of struggle these days. I think anybody who was in school during the pandemic really went through quite a unique experience. So it made it a little bit harder for them to communicate in person. They might have gotten used to being on Zoom or being able to digitally communicate. So verbal communication is absolutely key. That's one of those survival skills, if you will. Written communication, I mean, it could be as simple as just, good grammar and capitalization, but being able, I tell students a lot, if you're emailing somebody and you're trying to reach out, don't bury the lead, put your ask up tops. People are busy, and, knowing how to professionally and respectfully email and communicate with people in written communication. Let's see, some other soft skills. Kirsten, what am I missing here?
I've heard in a couple of conferences recently etiquette, that being professional and being polite, following up with a thank you note. That's huge. It still helps makes you stand out above from others. And even if it's a thank you email, making sure that you're thanking them for their time, and then also dressing professionally. Sometimes students don't stop to think, this is my opportunity to make a first impression.
And then I thought too, teamwork. I think we all know that at some point in your life, you're going to be on a team and you're going to have to figure out how to collaborate with other people. And it's probably not going to always be the list of people that you would have chosen. So being able to be a good team player, and show up appropriately, and help the work go by more easily is a big one as well.
Thank you. So one of the questions that submitted was, what can we do if our student does not know what she wants to pursue?
I think that's all the exploration that we're talking about. And we highly encourage you to ask your student to come and attend some of the events. And I have to say, depending on what school We have several career development classes that can really kind of help you assess your personality and maybe help point you in a direction. Our career counselors are incredible in helping students kind of maybe whittle down the field and encourage them to try some different things out. Anything else for you, Chloe?
I think you probably hit the nail on the head with come to literally any event. I will tell you, I've sat through so many info sessions, mostly out of obligation, but I don't think there's been one that I haven't learned something new or that has intrigued me. As Kirsten mentioned earlier, you might learn that you absolutely do not want to be an accountant, but that's part of the way to know what you do want to pursue is knowing what you don't. So attending any and all, we have some students that come to almost every info session. A lot of them are freshmen because they really just genuinely don't know. And especially the ones where we'll have panels and it'll be a discussion where they can hear. A lot of times it's alumni and they've been in majors like your student, and just being able to hear from them what their career journey looked like. And a lot of times those alumni will hang out after the fact. And if your student goes up to them and says, "Hey, I really connected with what you said. I do not know what I want to do. Would you ever have coffee with me or chat with me for 15 minutes?" I don't think I've ever heard an alumni say no, especially the ones that show up for a panel. So engaging in those events will inevitably lead to them being able to network with folks that they may connect with and be interested by.
And I think that one of the things to really stress if your student is in the earlier part of their Tulane journey is to tell them to start as soon as they can because the stakes are lower if they can start really early too. And so they don't have to feel as anxious about it if they've got a longer time horizon, for making those bigger decisions and narrowing things down. And so if they cast a wide net at the beginning, the stakes are lower because they've got several irons in the fire, let's say. And so then as they continue on, then they can be more focused. And then those more focused attempts, have more of a payoff, but they have more, they're kind of worth more, but they can get their training and become more comfortable with those earlier endeavors. And so they can do those kinds of things where they are going to a panel and staying around for the coffee and chit chat afterwards. And that's different from being in a one-on-one interview where the stakes are really high.
Hmm.
So I think that's especially
Great point.
good for parents to just encourage that way and help them kind of broaden their mindset about that, and not put it off, to get engaged. Um, so here's
Another thing
another,
Chloe and I'm so sorry.
go ahead.
Another thing Chloe and I were talking about when we were preparing for this is how many employers you may think that they're one thing. They have so many different jobs and roles in that company. And so just because it's, Deloitte, if they're not interested in finance, there may be other jobs, there may be management, there may be human resources, there may be marketing, there's other roles that they are recruiting for. And so don't limit yourself.
So another question that's been submitted is it realistic for a sophomore to still secure an internship for this summer? So we're mid-February right now. What do you think, Kirsten and Chloe?
Say, I'll gladly feel this one because I probably put a little bit of fear into you talking about the internship timeline. Absolutely not too late. I think the frustrating thing and what I was talking about earlier was that that junior year internship timeline. Again, you could be a junior at this time and still secure an internship for that summer. It's really just those larger, really competitive organizations where sometimes if you miss that timeline, you do miss the opportunity. But in general, definitely not too late to secure a summer internship. Plenty of opportunities. We have employers still coming on campus yet this semester that will be looking for summer 2025 internships, which is, as we love it. It's this summer, not next summer. So certainly not too late. They may have to adjust their expectations if they, for our students, if you really wanted to work at Goldman Sachs, actually the internship, well, the ones for summer 2026 are still open, but summer 2025 is full. But that doesn't mean you still can't get a finance internship with a great organization. It might be smaller, it might be a boutique firm. It just means that you might have to adjust those plans slightly. But no, certainly not too late. And we'd love to hear more and be able to help them get connected.
Another thing I wanted to ask you all to speak to is just again to you mentioned about how there is more of an effort for employers to provide paid internships, but there are some fields where that's not as likely. Um, so there are some grant funds that Tulane has through a couple of different sources that students can apply for in case they are taking an unpaid internship. Then some of those funds could be used for, say, the travel, or maybe it's for some of their living expenses if they have to be
Mm,
in a different city than their home city and stuff. Are there a couple of things you all could say about that? Um,
I
yeah.
know that our career educators handle that program, and so I would want to connect them to the right career educator. Chloe, you may have a little bit more information.
I think Penny, I think you mentioned it really is that there are, I know that it might not be for every location, but like I know someone has made some generous donations for housing in New York to help some students we have a lot of students interested in interning in New York. There's some opportunity to apply for housing grants. But yeah, no, I think you're probably right, Kirsten. I don't know if I have all of the information on that, but I also think that it could be that some employers may even have some opportunities. The other thing to keep in mind is that sometimes for employers, if it's less of an internship, like a long time internship program, and it's actually a leadership program, a lot of times they actually might fly students out. So you could expand your search to more of those leadership programs, which could just be one weekend or one week, but those could be expenses paid.
Yeah, but if there are opportunities, please come see our offices. We want to make sure we connect you to resources if it is an unpaid opportunity or an underpaid.
so I will I think make a last call for questions from parents to submit your question here if you would like to have Kirsten and Chloe respond this evening. Their email addresses are back up on the screen. If you want to take those down, if you have a question you might want to pursue later. Um, the other thing that I will mention, in case you missed it, and you're looking for some of that information that kind of falls in a different place in that career development continuum, is that we did a different webinar last month for families that was more of an overview of career services at Tulane and an introduction to how that website has been remodeled to be more user friendly. And so that is already archived on the family programs website. So if you feel like some things are mentioned here that just kind of are coming from a different part of those resources, you might want to go look at that webinar as well. Um, if you don't want to listen to the whole webinar, the slides are also archived. So you could just scroll through the slides and see if the topics that appeal to you are in that presentation, and then maybe go back to the video recording to find the specifics. So let's see, I think that we've got another couple of questions. So someone has submitted a question. What about IES internships? And I'm not sure what IES stands for, but maybe Chloe and Kirsten do. Or we'll ask this questioner to provide more specificity.
I think it might be study abroad related, if I'm correct.
So if
And I
that
would
parent
say
could type in a little more context for us for that question, that'd be helpful.
I think you're right, and I know that we have one that that we started this that's going to happen this summer in Barcelona, and it is internship focused.
Yes,
I think it's the first one, and we did have some funding available also for students that could not afford the
yes.
full. Yep.
And I will mention that in the one of the previous parent newsletters, there was an article about that with links to more information. And off the top of my head, I can't remember, but I think it was in the January one. So if you go to families.tulane.edu to the communications tab, there are links to the previous issues of the parent newsletter. So if you wanted to go back and get that information, you could go there to find that. There's a paragraph about it, about how students can apply and what it encompasses, and it links to more detailed information on the website about that first international study abroad internship program in Barcelona. So,
And I would
okay,
just say oh, sorry, Penny. I was just going to say that in general, any experience is great, whether it's abroad or not. I mean, that probably would be a life-changing experience for your student to go and experience. So we would love for them to get that. The only thing that I would say is, again, if you're dead set on working for a Deloitte, a Goldman Sachs, a big organization, just to be mindful that that junior year summer, they very likely are hiring interns that they would convert to full time. So if that's just something to be mindful of, if that junior year you go abroad and you get a somewhat varied internship experience, you might pull yourself out of the running for a full-time conversion from an internship for another big organization, but depends on the student and their interest. And if they're a little bit more open, or if they're not necessarily dead set on one of those bigger, highly competitive organizations, go get it. By all means, please go enjoy.
okay, well, I think that we will wrap up soon. So, to all of our family members who joined us tonight, we're really grateful for your participation and your interest in this topic. We always encourage feedback. So if you have specific feedback about the content of this webinar, you can email that to families@tulane.edu, and I'll share that with our presenters. If you have comments that you want to type in right now before we close in just a second, I'm happy to receive that too. If you have any short comments you want to send us. If you have suggestions for other webinar topics, I'm always happy to entertain those. So you can email me at families@tulane.edu. So, sometimes a webinar topic that you appreciate is something that a parent a couple of years ago suggested to us, and we've cultivated the content for that topic. And so your feedback really matters. So we want you to feel like this is an ongoing conversation you can have with us. So again, thank you for participating. We wish all the best to your student as they pursue these different opportunities and acquire these skills and experiences to help them kind of realize their goals after Tulane. And I would especially like to thank Kirsten and Chloe for being with us tonight to provide all this information. So I will just make sure you can see their email addresses one last time and capture that information if you'd like. And then we will close here. So thanks so much, everyone. Have a great evening.